Emma is 15 years old. When she was little, she quickly realized that her sister Abigail, who is sick, gets much more attention than she does. Abigail has a rare medical condition that makes her suffer, sometimes even endangers her life, which means she has to go to the hospital a lot. And thus, Abigail obviously needs much more attention than Emma does. Emma knows this, of course. She understands her sister's needs and wants her to feel well. But Emma is also a child with needs of her own. At 6 years old, when Emma starts school, she quickly realizes that she has something Abigail doesn't. The means to be good. Praiseworthy. Praise through academic validation, though, gets you only to a certain degree of attention. And Emma quickly realizes she can't always perform, can't always be the perfect compensation for her sister's illness. Emma sees how every time Abigail shows signs of her illness, their parents always rush to her side. Finally, at 15, Emma finally knows what she needs to do to stuff that everlasting hole in her stomach. She needs to flip the switch. Stop being a compensation and start being worse. And Emma isn't alone in that mindset. Up until I was around 16 to 17 years old, I craved attention. I did everything to get it. Problems, illnesses, injuries, academic validations, being good, being perfect, anything to not be mediocre and to not disappear within the crowd. Anything to not be forgotten. And I've seen this in others as well. The most common way it's phrased is simply, I have to be better. I have to be not mediocre, but better than everyone else. We want to stand out, of course, because it's human to want attention and love. And the problem is, we simply can't have it without being different. In this case, better. But when our desire for attention gets so strong and we simply crave it so much but can't have it, we go for the other side, the other option. Being worse. Attention at any cost, even if it means harming oneself. And I'm not only referring to self-harm, but being worse in general. We'll get to what exactly that means later. And this sets up the central question. Why do we equate being worthy and worthy of love with being extreme? What about society created these misbeliefs, and are they true? This is not our general desire to succeed. This is the fear of insignificance. And today, I want to talk about that. Let's take a quick look at the history and evolution of us humans and see how we got here. Psychologically, humans evolved to crave attention, because in social groups, attention meant survival. Being noticed by the group leader, having allies, or simply being cared for. But of course, being worse than others did not usually give you any sort of advantages, more disadvantages, because you might have been left behind if you had an injury, and of course, back then, we didn't have the means to treat all of these medical conditions that we have now. So it seems something must have changed in our society recently. According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, after safety and belonging comes self-esteem and recognition. The fear of mediocrity often arises when our need for esteem isn't met in healthy ways. For example, we didn't feel loved in the ways that we wanted as a child, and these kinds of things oftentimes stem from childhood. Obviously, it can also occur in adults, but with children, it's much more common to change them in a way that is that significant and also obviously traumatize them. But trauma has always been around, it's not a new phenomenon. And I'm pretty sure not everyone who craves attention to the point where they'd be willing to actually sacrifice their well-being for getting it has childhood trauma. Well, the vast majority, but not everyone, so there has to be another explanation. And I believe there are other factors that force us to rely on drastic measures. Here's one. Many people develop a binary self-construct, black and white thinking. Either they're exceptional or worthless. It's like black and white thinking, like I said, a cognitive distortion often found in perfectionism or certain anxieties or personality structures. It could also be explained by the so-called self-discrepancy theory. The self-discrepancy theory, developed by psychologist E. Torrey Higgins, explains that negative emotions result from a mismatch between different versions of the self. The actual self, who you believe you are, the ideal self, who you want to be, and the ought self, who you think you should be, meaning who you ought to be. Discrepancies between the ideal and actual self lead to sadness and depression, while discrepancies between the actual self and the ought self lead to feelings of guilt and anxiety. And if we can't reach our ideal, we swing the other side to the other extreme to justify our worth. When someone grows up equating being loved with being special and impressive, their ideal self becomes really perfectionistic, and their actual self inevitably falls short because you can't possibly be that perfect. So the actual self discrepancy triggers feelings of deep guilt, shame, sadness, and anxiety. And instead of tolerating this gap, meaning saying that, well, I'm not perfect, but that's okay, we swing to the opposite extreme to make this feel less discomforting. We simply become worse. But there is a more general and society-related aspect to this that I want to talk about right now, and it, as so often, has to do with the internet. What the internet does is, as we all know, especially social media, reward extremes. Beautiful faces, extreme body types, trauma, tragedy, weird facts, unusual content, it all leads to virality and fame with a bit of luck. So, in a way, social media teaches us to go to extreme to justify our worth. Although, of course, that's not all. According to the social compensation theory by Festinger from 1954, people evaluate themselves based on others. With social media, we constantly compare ourselves to highlights and extremes, and we can't always be positive, as we all know. So yes, we strive for unusual success and perfection, but when we can't actually achieve that because social media shows us an unrealistic standard, we go down the rabbit hole of black and white thinking that leads us all the way down to self-destruction. Furthermore, next to fame, likes, and views, showing emotions on social media also makes people sympathize with you and thus give you validation. Of course, this is also true outside of social media, but in real life, usually people become really sick of you really quickly because they simply don't want to be surrounded by something negative all the time. On the internet, however, it's praised, welcomed. Not always, not all the time, but often enough for people to react and click on more of these kinds of videos. But why exactly does this mindset work? Why can it actually sometimes be true that the worse your life is, the better it is? It sounds like a contradiction, but like I said, it can apply to some people's lives. This time, let's take a closer look at Emma. I just want to preface this by saying that I am not at all related to or know someone who is like Emma. She just is made up for the sake of this video. Emma craves attention. So much so that she's willing to sacrifice her mental well-being and maybe even a lot of shame to get it. She believes attention and love is something to be earned, so of course she will do everything in her power to achieve it. Her ideal self is both incredibly high and incredibly low. She believes in order to be loved or gain attention, she needs to go to one or the other. One extreme, either be awful or perfect. And since she can't be perfect like she realized in school early on, she gets to be worse. She thinks to be perfect, you need to either be incredibly flawed or like actually perfect, like the ideal self she sees on social media. So yes, Emma's life does get better when she gets worse because she achieves the one thing that she wants, attention. But here's the drill, it's never going to be enough. No matter how hard she tries, Emma is never going to find the love she's looking for because what she is looking for is unconditional love. And that can't be earned. You can't find unconditional love by conditioning yourself to something. And unfortunately, there is no happy ending here. Emma is going to have to accept that she's never going to find the love she was looking for in childhood. She is going to have to grieve it and at some point try to let go. And here's what's going to happen to her if she chooses to go to therapy and actually grieve and heal from the things that she's experienced. She is going to become mediocre and find happiness in that. It sounds paradoxical, and it sort of is, at least in today's society. Society, the internet, and possibly our own minds are telling us that in order to be happy, we need to be extraordinary. What if I told you that that's actually bullshit? Mediocrity is actually what truly brings us joy. And I'm not talking about being average, having the average life. Of course, you need to have goals, and you need to want to achieve those goals and follow your dreams. Of course, that's not the kind of mediocrity that I'm talking about here. Yes, receiving validation and attention is healthy to a certain extent, but in moderation. Living in extremes leads to burnout and a general dissatisfaction with life. You never get to really be, to truly just simply exist for the sake of existing. You don't get to enjoy existing because you always have to prove something. Being creative and achieving your goals can be very healthy if you don't push it to an extreme. External validation can be good for you, but like I said, in moderation and only if you don't depend on it. Especially because then it'll finally be enough. Because there is no enough anymore. There is no finish line. You are already there. I saw a quote relating this on TikTok recently that goes like, everything is a win if the goal is to experience, and I think it's just simply so true and applies to this especially. Because the goal is to simply enjoy existing. An ordinary life can make you so happy. And of course, that doesn't go for everyone. I know some people strive for an extraordinary life. But what I'm talking about here isn't to be extraordinary in the sense that you have all of the success, but simply that you have more than the average person has, which is love, friends, a social life, and all that kind of stuff. Because it will always be about happiness, but to achieve that kind of happiness, you need to let go. You need to stop striving for things that you can't achieve. And I know this is much easier said than done because society inflicted this mindset onto us. It's not only childhood trauma, a big part of it is, but also society, like I said. I believe everyone can have it if they've been subjected to a certain kind of media, and that certain kind of media is the mainstream. And letting go of a mindset that you're almost forced to consume on a daily basis is really hard. It borders on impossible. But of course, for most people, it is possible, especially with therapy. I know this all sounded kind of like a motivational speech, but I really hope that I was able to at least help some of you understand yourselves better and maybe motivate you to go to therapy, work on the stuff that you are working on, and try to heal. I know healing and having the perfect life, I know like the perfect life isn't like a really good life, isn't possible for everyone because some people have things that they deal with that they simply can't just heal from, like a chronic illness, mental or physical. But what I'm trying to say with this video is you should try and you should stop striving to be perfect and extraordinary in every sense, but simply accept the fact that you already are, because every human is different, and even though it may feel like you are just a copy of everyone else, you're not. You are different, and not in a bad way. Alright, that was it for the video. This one was a bit more personal, I think. I usually don't make videos like this, but I really hope that I was able to help some of you guys, and if you liked the video, leave a like. If you like the channel, subscribe, and I really hope to see you guys in the next video. So sorry that I had to miss 1 or 2 videos these past couple of months, but I've got so much to do with school. I had 1 exam, 1 test on Friday, and there's another exam on Monday, and then next week there's another 2 exams for me, so yeah.